the Houston Rockets will not be competing for 50 plus wins in the West this season. They won 20 last year, and I don't necessarily think they're going to be too much better this year, as they're still a team that is emphasizing development of the young guys and probably not looking to be competitive quite yet.
Yeah, I really like this team. I got on board the bandwagon last year. I just sort of was interested by their young guys and wanted to watch them play. That being said, I did not stay that committed on the bandwagon in terms of actually watching a ton of Houston Rockets games after the first couple months of the season. The turnovers were a little bit much, and that team took a while before we really started seeing solid performances out of Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr. being up and down. But I love the roster, like the shape of the roster. I like their guards. I like that they got these two young spicy backcourt partners in Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr. I like their sort of armada of wings. Tari Eason is a draft pick I was really interested in. Deshaun Tate is always like pretty fun as this undersized utility wing. And then I think it worked out for them in the draft in terms of not so much as like one of the better players falling to them, because I wasn't huge on Jabari Smith Jr. when he was slated to be the number one pick in the draft. I didn't quite see that, but now that he's fallen to Houston, where he's going to be pairing with Alperen Sengun, I really like that synergy, just like having like the really mobile shooter versus the sort of like low post passer sort of thing. They're going to be short on rim protection, like everything we said about Sacramento, times 1 million for Houston, but it's going to be a fun team to watch, especially and with these guys all with most of these guys a year older, they're not going to have the same growing pains they have last year, where they just opened up the season just throwing the ball away on it. Felt like every second possession was a turnover, and it's it's hard. It's just hard to get excited about tuning into Houston Rockets games when I think they started the season something like 1-15 or 1-16, or it was
rough, yeah.
Yeah.
It took them a while to win a game. I mean, they were a young team playing without a lead guard. I won't say on the roster. John Wall was technically on the roster, but
Yeah.
without a lead guard playing any minutes for them, it's just really hard to run a functional offense without anyone who can be a playmaker, a facilitator. And they didn't have that. I mean, they're trying to develop Jalen Green into one, and he's
Yep.
certainly made strides along the course of last season. Got way, way better second half of the season. Kind of Anthony Edwards vibes almost, with how bad he was first half of the season and how much better he looked second half of the season. But this year, once again, they do not have a real point guard on the roster. They're relying on a bunch of shooting guards and wings to set up the offense for them.
Yeah, I do think that even though they'll cut their turnovers a little bit, I would still anticipate them trying to get out of last place in the NBA in terms of turnover percentage. I think a big swing piece for them is Kevin Porter Jr. I think him,
Yep.
Right now, I describe him as talented but erratic. He flashes a lot of pretty interesting skills, but then he also just goes long stretches where it's just like turnovers and bricks. But so I still don't know if how the NBA views him right now, whether he's kind of in a fortunate situation where he's getting a lot of shots and a lot of minutes and he's going to fade back into obscurity, or if he can really seize this opportunity and cement himself as sort of like a electric backcourt combo guard who can be a big point guard or be a shooting guard, and how he fits with Jalen Green is going to be a big part of that, because obviously that's kind of their crown jewel that they're sort of prioritizing right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's one to watch.
Yeah, well, I think there's going to be another Texas team we'll talk about in a little bit coming up here who might challenge them for leading the league in turnover rate, but we'll get to them. So I thought there was a really interesting quote from Steven Silas when he was talking about Jabari Smith Jr. a few days ago at training camp. And he was kind of just talking about, I don't have the the exact quote in front of me, but he was kind of just talking about like how underrated it was just how good Jabari Smith is as a defender who just has the tools to do absolutely everything on the court. Here's a 6'10 guy who has some of the quickest hands for a 6'10 guy you'll ever see, who has the foot speed to stay in front of, just about every wing in the NBA. And I'm not going to say guy can protect the rim or anything, but in terms of a guy who you can put on another team's best scorer and just expect him to really slow them down, we could see that already his rookie year, and I think for sure we'll see that in the future.
Yeah, I think there's a element to the Houston Rockets, which is like usually when you tune into a watch a young team, you're trying to see some raw offensive firepower. But for the defense nerds out there, I think what makes Houston interesting is they've got this collection of like very highly touted defensive young guys, which like Jabari being the obvious one there. Like, yeah, he's got incredible mobility for a guy that size. You mentioned the quick hands. Usman Garuba, whose rookie campaign was like, derailed a little bit.
I remember like play for Spain this summer before.
Oh, did you catch him play a little bit? Yeah. He was getting crazy rave reviews for his defensive potential in his draft class. We haven't seen it yet, but I remember like being extremely impressed by the footage I was able to see. I already mentioned Tari Eason as well. It's just like a really large wing with a ton of mobility and a really hot motor. So I think, tuning in even for those guys and watching because with this, whenever Eric Gordon isn't guarding the other team's best player, it's going to be one of those guys. So you're going to get to see some really young players try to make a big impact on defense. So even if the offense continues to be a turnover prone nightmare, watch the other side of the ball, because the more they turn the ball over, the more defensive possessions we get.
So I want to do a little bit of a thought experiment with you, because the more I've watched and thought about this young core here, the more excited I get about the future Rockets, present day Rockets maybe notwithstanding, but I think Jalen Green has the potential to just be a dynamite offensive player, both as a playmaker and scorer, and we've seen flashes of that. And I think Jabari Smith Jr., hopefully I'm not overstepping my bounds here, but I'm just about ready to call this the future best 3-and-D player in the NBA. So I'll go ahead and ask you here, who would you say is the current best 3-and-D player in the NBA? And do you think that's worth, let's just throw this out there, like the third overall pick in terms of value?
Yeah. Oh, great question. Who are the best 3-and-D? Michael Bridges last year.
Yeah. That's who I had in mind, but yeah.
I think, if OG Anunoby can play a full healthy season, he's another guy. I think I'm looking at the defense first, because I think there's a lot more guys who can bang threes than there are who can play, defense at an all defensive level. So yeah, would I trade the third pick in the draft for Michael Bridges or OG Anunoby? If I was a contending team, I think I would, unless I thought I could get a potential superstar with the third pick. I probably would pull the trigger on that trade. I think very highly of guys like that. I think it's people, think they try to draw this line between role players and stars, but there's some kinds of role players that are so rare and make such a wide impact on your roster that it's the same thing as having a star, even if they're not averaging 20 points per game or 10 assists or 10 rebounds or whatever those like putting up gaudy stats. Like you see, like playoff lineups just need that functional piece that makes lineups work. And without that piece, collections of stars can sometimes be a mess. So yeah, I think the value, I'd have to probably spend some more time really thinking about this, but I don't think it's ridiculous to say that the best 3-and-D player in the NBA has the value approaching something like a number 3 pick. If we're going down to someone like Danny Green, I'm not trading, Danny Green or even like peak Danny Green for the number 3 pick. But if I'm getting like a big wing who really has that level of defensive value and is shooting 40% from 3, I'm I'm not hanging up the phone.
I mean, of course they'd probably have to be in their mid or early 20s before you'd really be excited about doing that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the main reason I wanted to bring that up is just because like Jabari Smith, let's just say his handle hasn't looked great, and so a lot of
No.
people have been questioning his star potential. And I think it's possible, if not likely, that the dude is never going to be like a number one scoring option and star player unless he has some sort of like Pascal Siakam like incredible development of a handle out of a player who didn't previously have that skill set. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think he can still, even without that, even if the only thing he ever does is catch and shoot and just defend the bejesus out of the other team's best player every single night, like there's still a guy who can make a lot of money in the NBA and be a very impactful player.
It's funny watching his draft footage. I'm not sure I've ever seen Jabari Smith get a layup or score on the interior, get a contested finish at the rim. Like it's just nonstop pull ups, and he's incredible shoot.
Jumpers. Yeah.
Yeah, and the like the full variety of the kinds of jumpers he can hit is really impressive. Like deserves to be compared to a lot of other like really good shooting prospects. Like maybe not all the way to like JJ Redick, but sort of like a lesser version of that. Except he's 6'9" or 6'10", so that's a much different player than JJ Redick is. And the mobility looked good. I When he was touted as the number one overall pick, I didn't get it. I was like, I like for all the reasons that you're saying, but when he dropped down to number 3, I started feeling better about what kind of player he could be. And like you say, that's a really solid base to have. He could develop. He could have an unpredictable development arc where these skills that are currently completely lacking for his game, something else pops, and we're talking about a different kind of player.
Well, he's no Keegan Murray, but let's hope that he has a very successful career. So my big question to you is there's no obvious lead playmaker on the Rockets roster right now. But do you see Jalen Green becoming that guy this year, or is there another guy on the roster you could see that happening for?
I mean, I already talked about Kevin Porter Jr. a little bit, and I still think that's the guy is going to have the ball in his hands. Jalen Green is going to get every opportunity. I haven't been super in love with what I've seen of his passing package. I'm hoping they play a ton out of the post with Alperen Sengun. That's
Yeah.
by far the best passer on their roster. Like by
Yeah.
far. Like in terms of especially, yeah, he throws some flashy passes. He does some pretty insane things. So I would, watching just enough Rockets games last year, it was painful to not have the Sengun experience fully unleashed. So
Yeah.
I'm ready to get back, or I'm ready to stay on the bandwagon if we get tons of Alperen Sengun offensive possessions, because I think that's like if they're going to let wild passes be thrown, I'd rather them be thrown by him than by Jalen Green or Kevin Porter Jr. Who's your favorite? Who's your favorite young guy in the Rockets? They're all young guys in the Rockets. Is there one that you're sort of like following with interest?
Yeah, I was really hoping to blindside you by Usman Garuba, but since you already
Ah,
brought him up,
yeah, yeah.
I'll I do like Usman. The one thing I'll say is he's not huge. Obviously he's very athletic, but he is an undersized big man.
Yeah.
Doesn't currently have a 3-point shot. So I mean, he's a moldable ball of clay, right? He could become something great given his defensive intensity and athleticism, or who knows, things might not pan out. But another young guy I really like that I'll bring up is Kenyon Martin Jr.
Interesting.
or KJ Martin, I think, as a lot of times he goes by. But I just he's kind of a combo forward. He's a little bit undersized for a 4, but he's played both positions, and he's a pretty steady 3-point shooter and just a like super bouncy athlete. So beyond that, there isn't necessarily a ton going on with his game right now, but just kind of a fun, off the bench, exciting offensive player.
He demanded a trade. Did you hear that over the offseason?
I heard rumors of that, yeah, but like
Yeah.
there's so
Not
many
not
trade.
demanded. That's a little bit putting it strongly. I think he
Yeah,
basically inquired like, look, I don't I see you drafting all these other small forwards, combo forwards. Like
that's
I'm
true.
looking for a better opportunity somewhere else, sort of thing.
They did draft a couple other forwards, and maybe he will got an opportunity somewhere else. I think he's good enough. He'll find a roster spot. He'll contribute in the NBA. And
Yeah.
I will just quickly throw a bone. Josh Christopher, big summer league standout,
Yeah.
looked really good. I think his development is coming along. You know, like he's another guy who struggled last year consistency wise, but he was rookie coming into his second year now, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him improve quite a bit as well.
Especially if they trade Eric Gordon at some point, which I'm not sure that they're going to do, but that would open up a lot of minutes for some of those guards who are a little bit more on the fringe of the rotation right now, like him, Dyshon Nix, Ty Washington. Um, but yeah, I mean, Josh Christopher is definitely a rookie that they seem to have a little bit invested in. So hopefully we see a little bit more of him this year.